Okay, so today I'd like to talk about movement and how everything is in movement all the time. It just and Hubble, a scientist, now we have the Hubble telescope that's named after the scientist. He discovered clusters of stars that we recognize now as galaxies. So he recognized the galaxies are together, but he also recognized that the galaxies are moving away from our spot, that there is movement in the universe, an expansion movement, expanding all the time in the universe. Now, scientists go back and forth about what happened when they were all close together. Was that the beginning? Is there a beginning? Is it ever, we'll just leave that on the side today and recognize that it moves. And that there is an expansion, and that expansion is in us as well, and that we expand in movement all the time. And then for the sake of this conversation, if we would consider that the beginning is a breath moment. Now, whether it's an inhale or an exhale, again, I don't know, but the idea that maybe the exhale came first and it spread out, and then with the inhale and then back out again. And if we can imagine that we are those little galaxies, that we're always that expansion and contraction, and that every time we exhale, we move farther and farther out. And we rearrange all those particles around us, and we get a chance to recognize something new all the time. That breath goes in our lungs, the oxygen fuels us, does what it needs to do. And when we exhale, that turns into fuel for plant life, and movement for the rest of the earth. So for now, let's stay on the earth. And recognition of movement is plenty. We're going to start with our breath and recognize that breath is handed down through all time. But it's also a recognition of that movement of our consciousness, our thought, all our observations through the whole universe. And as our bodies move, our memories move, they reshape. We put them into different contexts based on what we know now, reflecting back. Our awareness moves, and in that awareness, our allowance expands, much like the universe expands. And then through that expansion, we witness more, we understand more, and as we understand more, we become more compassionate, more understanding. Our bodies were created for movement. Now, there's a movie called Theory of Everything. It's about Stephen Hawking life, and you can find it free right now on the streaming. It's about probably 9 years old or so, but if you have a chance, I would strongly suggest you watch it, because this man went from full movement in his body to almost no movement, and yet his expansion, the movement inside of him never stopped. And there was an embracement of that movement despite the contraction of other movement. In fact, I wonder sometimes if he was able to move fully the way he was when he was younger, if his brain would have expanded as much as what it did otherwise. I mean, it's up for debate. I don't know that we'll ever know, but it's fascinating to me. His movement was more of a contracting, and yet his mind expanded. And we all understand that, all his writings. But when you listen to him speak, and there's a compassion about him for everything in that expansion of his awareness of the universe. So our bodies were created to move, but our senses, I think, are the ones that are part of us that decode that movement. It's constantly decoding our sight, our smells, our sensations, the auditory wavelengths that move around. We decode all of it. And how often are we aware of that? How often are we aware of how much movement around us our bodies are actually decoding and are aware of at any given time? There's a ton. There's a ton. And how often do we even just, move with that? Do we allow our movement to somehow match with the movement of what we're recognizing around us? I started the last few weeks actually walking before coffee, which for me is a feat in itself to go and get myself out of the house and do something without that input. When I was in school, really young in school, I found it really, really hard to sit still through lectures, through school. I was always moving. My feet were moving. I was tapping. I was one of those annoying people that had to keep moving all the time. In college, actually, I remember it was like almost like I had a still bike with pedals underneath my desk. My feet would go in that motion through the whole, it was the only way I could focus until my roommate shared with me the joys of coffee. And I didn't realize at the time, but I was focusing better. It was, I could handle things for longer periods of time. It wasn't until my second jaunt at college at around 28, 29 years old when I was studying education. And we were studying all the different ways people learn and move and need to recognize. That the awareness for me that I was one of the 7 types of ADD came into focus, and we were able to explore that with that college and those people. Yeah, there are 7 types of ADD. Who knew, right? So for me, that coffee is another layer of focus because my style, a stimulant based with movement, and also some extra things in the diet like extra omegas help that regulation for my brain. So to take myself out of that, to explore the world, the way I was when I was younger, without that extra external focus has been interesting, because what I found is my movement, because this is a walking exercise, I'm not sitting still. My walking, I walk for about 2 miles down to a local park. And there's no extra humans, although sometimes you can hear a car in the distance because that's just the way our air travels. But mostly it's birds overlapping. It's fish and otters in the water. I had no idea how that fish actually play down at the pond and pop themselves out of the water on a regular basis, and the otters that are there, and the leaves that rustle when the wind blows, and the turtles that bury themselves in the sand while there's no humans down there, and they just kind of sink in, and the frogs croaking, and even the snakes. I've seen more snakes this year than I care to even think that they're down at the park. And the colors of the wildflowers and the lilies that are coming up now in the water. I find that I'm not focused on any one particular individual thing, although I have stopped and taken photos of many of them. But the sensations as you walk in this space of external movement, you find the rhythm of that movement in your step. And it becomes a oneness with that, a natural symphony, if you will. So it's like my footsteps become part of that percussion section of everything that's walking around or floating around, the sounds and the temperature and everything. Do we take the time to recognize our movement? Our own particular recognition of the movement around us and how our bodies fit into it, that extra flow of life. In that movement, we're connected. We hear all the time, in fact, there's scientific evidence that a little butterfly can affect the wind patterns all the way across the sea. We know this stuff, but do we allow times for our bodies to recognize with that? We allow our breath to exchange with all of creation in that movement. And do we allow for our emotions to be present in the movement? We always talk about our thoughts and needing to control our thoughts or recognize our thoughts or be mindful of our thoughts. And yet in the breath and in that movement, do we allow our feelings to be part of that symphony that goes on around us? I think our emotions are more of a movement within us and tell us more about who we are and with the world than our thoughts do. Our thoughts just kind of, they're all, I don't know about you, mine are all over the place all the time. It's just, it's more dissonance than symphony. But to connect with our actual emotions, and emotions doesn't mean how we're actually feeling, although we translate it into that. But is it a measure of, where we are really in the moment? What's our compassion level for the world around us and ourselves? We recognize ourselves, in that movement of our emotions with how we move and how we even move through our day. Or do we just put that on hold and rely on our thoughts? Forgetting that our emotions, I really think the world itself and nature runs on emotions way more than thought. I don't know that the birds are out there thinking about what they're doing. I don't know that the flowers actually consciously say, okay, now it's time for me to turn towards the sun. It's all based in that full recognition, that heart-centeredness emotion of being a part and feeling how you are in that moment and in the world. And in our emotions, we fully recognize our senses. What are our senses telling us in that moment? We always talk about the pit in the stomach, right? We recognize things like that, but we're recognizing the joyful ones as well. The ones that bring us joy and happiness. The ones that help us really connect, not only to the outside world, but to our internal one. This is not the setting for me to take you on a walk outside to explore. I like to try to do it while you're sitting here. If you'd sharing this exercise with me, I'm going to first ask you to close your eyes, because so much of what we recognize is visual. So if we take that away right now and then allow the rest of our senses to be in the forefront. And as you take a breath, feel how your body feels the temperature of the room and the air. What sounds are you aware of? What sense? How are you feeling the rhythm of your breath and your heartbeat? Allow those sensations to merge in that awareness with all that is with you presently. Allow the senses to be a gateway to your inner world and not a distraction. Allow it to be the music that carries you to where you need to be and what you need to recognize. Allow your breath to merge with the sounds. To feel the air. What emotions unfold. Allowing and observing without judgment. Surrendering. Surrender to the present moment. You are safe in this moment, in this place. There's no danger to be aware of your sensations, your emotions. Slow your breathing. Recognize the sensations around you. Rest in the peace of the movement of the world, of your breath. Surrender yourself to this space, everything around you, to the seat under your body, embracing the moment. Surrendering takes practice. Surrender takes courage. Awareness takes strength. We are all those right now, surrendering to all our sensations, our emotions, and our thoughts. Allowing, not resisting, being. Letting go of expectations, we release tension. Surrender to the flow of life, to the movement of life, to the wisdom within the movement. You are alive. You are safe. You are held. And trust the movement, both internal and external. Trust your awareness of that. And breathe. And take a nice deep breath of gratitude. Thank you.